In the last video, we built our PNPM workspace containing a HONO API and a UI with React. We also created a Postgres database with Docker and connected the API to it using Drizzle as our ORM. The second video of this series is about the user interface. We will continue to set up our React frontend, and we are going to use Shadcn and TailwindCSS to build a nice looking UI for our library management. Before we continue, I'm going to commit all our changes to Git. And I'm going to go ahead and close all these tabs to start from a clean slate. We are going to be working with our UI package. And here, now we want to go and add Shadcn to the user interface. We can go to Google, look for Shadcn, and then open the first URL. So we did create our UI using Vite. So we can go here and follow the instructions. We already did this part. And now let's add TailwindCSS and the Vite integration. Then let's replace everything in our index CSS to this Tailwind import. And now let's edit our tsconfig.json and add this section down here. I'm going to put them side by side so it's easier to go back and forth. Great. Let's apply changes to tsconfig cap.json right here. And here we want to add these lines, base URL and this paths config. I'm going to add a little comment here. Great. We update our bitconfig.ts. But before we install these types, let's go back to the terminal and add them. And now in our bitconfig.ts, we add these changes. So we're going to basically add a new plugin, TailwindCSS, and some resolve configuration, like that. Now we are ready to use the Shadcn CLI command. For the base color, we have these options as base. If we want to take a look at them, we can see neutral looks like this, zinc, stone, and slate. I'm gonna go with slate. Kind of like that combination of colors. It's a little bit less boring than these gray gradients. This is a little bit brown, I think. But yeah, let's just go with slate. Great, so we can see that we have some changes here in our project. We have the new components.json file, some changes to our base CSS, and this file was created, these utils. Let's go take a look. So here we have the components.json file. This file holds the configuration for our project. And the components.json file is actually an optional file. It is used by the CLI. But if you want to install components manually, you can just get rid of it. It uses this JSON schema definition to make sure that this file is aligned with the structure for Shadcn configurations. It adds some configuration for Tailwind and it defines a few aliases for our components. Additionally, it uses Lucid for as an icon library. Then let's see the index.css file. So the index.css file receives a lot of changes here. There are a lot of new variables added that are used by Shadcn and the utils.ts file. And then finally we have this utils.ts file with an utility function which is used from the Shadcn components. Okay, now we are ready to add our first component. Before doing that, let's take a look at the UI and see how it looks. Let's go clean everything here. We're not gonna need any of that. And now let's add this button component. And just like that, Shadcn added this button component to our project. You can go see it here. And now we can just go and use it. That simple. Let's run the UI again. And there it is. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's make sure that we commit our changes to Git. Okay, next up, we are going to implement a table for our book management system. We are going to run our app, and this is how it's looking right now with our Shadcn button. Let's look for a table and install it. Remember that we are in our UI package. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy one of these examples, and we are going to adapt it to our needs. So let's grab all the imports and then the table itself. For now, we don't need the button. If we save this, this is how it looks. I'm going to bring some dummy data for testing purposes, like 3 different books. And now let's update our table headers to reflect ID. We can also iterate the data. There we have it. Also, let's remove this here. We don't need the table caption. Great. So it looks like it's taking the full width of the page. Let's add some styles. Okay, so here we are making sure that the component, the app component, uses the entirety of the space available. And we are adding a slight gray background. We make it very dark so you can see how it looks like. But for now, let's just keep it like that. Now I want to add another component here that restricts the horizontal space that the table will take. We're telling the table to take 3/4 of the width of the page. We're adding some padding and the background white. To center, we just use flex and then justify center. So it looks like this. Maybe now we can also add another div with each one that says books and then add book. So now we can make the text a little bit bigger and push to the left the text or title and then to the other side the button. Okay, so that's looking good. Maybe now we can add another column for actions. And here we want to do some edit action here. And Shadcn has a drop-down component or drop-down menu that can be useful for this. We need something simple, maybe like this. So let's go ahead and install this. And now copy these dependencies and then implement the drop-down menu right here. Again, we're gonna simplify this, of course. But right now you can see this element, the drop menu trigger is the one that is going to open the actual drop-down menu. See? So we don't need the menu separator. We don't need this menu label. We just need edit and maybe delete. Maybe we can replace this with an icon, the ellipsis icon. Great. Now we can work on implementing our modal or dialog component for the add books button. Yeah, this works pretty well. Let's copy again component from Shadcn. Copy the dependencies. We can see here that we can either open the modal by clicking open here, or we can do so by passing a Boolean flag. So if I say true, this is going to open when the component renders. So maybe what we can do here is have some state that says now the add button can update the state. When we click on it, we want to set the model open state to true. I'm able to open this, but I cannot close it. And since we're not using the trigger and we're manually saying open when the state changes, we need to also pass the onModelChange callback, which can be just the set state from our model open state. So now if I click here, I can close the model by clicking outside, hitting the escape button on my keyboard, or just clicking the X right here. Great. So before we continue, I'm going to move all of this to its own component. We're going to create a new file. We don't need this anymore. And we're going to bring all these imports back to the model component. We have a couple of things that we need to handle from the app component. The model should receive a open flag and on open change. So basically we are just mirroring the API that the dialog component has, but we are going to do so through our model because later we are going to modify what's inside the model itself. Oops, what did I do here? So now from here, import the model anywhere. Let's give it a try now. Great. So now it's opening from there. If I also want to maybe open it from the edit button, we do the same. Perfect. Things are going to get more interesting. But before we continue, let's commit everything to Git. For the next step, we are going to work in our actual form. Let's temporarily make this state true so we can see the model open all the time. For the form, we are going to use React hook form, which is integrated into Shadcn forms. And also, we are going to use Zod to create schema validations and type safe forms. Let's install the form component. And now we add Zod to our dependencies. So let's go ahead and create our book form. In our book form, we are going to import Z from Zod, and then we will start creating our book schema. We want to have an optional ID because the ID might be present when we are editing a book, but might be not present when we are actually creating a new book. With Zod, we can also have some validation messages based on arbitrary rules. In this case, we have this message when the string is less than 1 character. And here for the author, we want the maximum value to be 200 in length. And I'm intentionally leaving the message empty so we can have just a default message in the error. Then from the book schema, we can actually infer the type and create. Cool thing is now, since this is a Zod object, we can infer the type of the object with z.infer, and we get an actual plain type that we can use for our component. So our book component is going to take, so we need to think that when we are creating a book, we are not going to pass any values, but when we are editing a book, we might receive a book, an existing book that we are going to modify. So here what we're doing is we define the base type for the book. But then when this type is used in the actual component, the book can be undefined because when we create a new book, there is no value being passed, right? So that's why we're doing it this way. And now to manage our book, we are going to make use of use form. And the book form is going to have the same infer type from the book schema. The resolver property in React hook form allows us to pass an external validation. And in this case, we're going to use Zod resolver with our book schema. And now we can start actually building our form using Shadcn components. We can directly map the book form as props for the form. And now I can start working on my first field for the form, which is going to be the title. And also we need to get the input component from Shadcn. So let's do that right now. Okay. Let's now go ahead and import the form component into the model component. Looking good so far. Gonna go ahead and clean up this. We don't need all this text. Let's put something more appropriate for our project. We can now just copy the first item and add a second field for the author this time. Okay, now I'm gonna add a little bit of padding to these fields and a section at the bottom for our submit button. That works. Now to capture the onSubmit event in the form, we are going to create our callback function that's going to take values typed with the book schema. And now we need to wrap our presentational form fields into an actual HTML form. In our instance of the React hook form with use form, we can pass a handle submit and give the callback that we created previously. So now right away, if I try to submit the form, the components are going to have this red highlighted border, and it's great. Zod really makes it simple to have typed forms and schema validations. And now if we also add the form message to each form field, we are going to see the actual error message that we defined previously in the book schema. And there it is. If there are no default values, we can sometimes see this received undefined instead of just empty string. So let's go ahead and add some empty strings for the default values for all the fields that the book schema supports. Okay, looking good. Let's actually rename this to book form. Okay, now we're gonna pass the book from the model, and the model is going to receive it from the app component. We could make this more extensible by assigning a children prop, so it can extend to anything that we pass here, but for this example we're just going to go with a book form. So this is not just a model anymore, it's just going to be book model. And we can also change the name to book model. And we have an issue here, because we are actually getting a mandatory prop here. Okay. Finally, what we need to do is when I click the edit button, I also want to set the book that I'm looking at into the model. For this example, we can just say that we're going to have a current book, and the state of this book is going to be type book, starting as undefined. So now when I click my edit element in the dropdown, okay, I want to do a couple of things. I want to set the model to open and set the current book to book. And I think we have an issue here because this array is not typed. And looks like we have this as a string in our type. And actually I want to have the IDs as number. And that's it. We can pass the current book as a book to the model. Okay, so now when we click here, we see our values in the form. The only problem now is that we're not resetting this. If I click edit here and then go to add a book, the values are going to be here. So we need to fix this. So to fix that issue, what we can do is, first of all, in the app, in our app component, when we click the button to add a book, we should also make sure that the state is reset to undefined for the current book. Like so. And additionally, in the form itself, we need to make sure that the book form is reset when the prop is updated. Here we can say book form dot reset book, just like that. So now it should be working fine. Let's see. We add this empty. If we edit, values are here. And then if we add again, great, values are gone. Something that I notice here is that we have this title that we can now modify based on the properties that we receive. Let's say if we have a book, we want to say edit book, otherwise add book. So when we add, we see add book. When we edit, we see edit book. For the next step, we are going to work on adding a confirmation dialog for the delete button. Let's create a delete book dialog component. Now let's go find the alert dialog Shadcn component. Now we install the component in our project. Now we import the subcomponents into our new file and go ahead and create the actual component. And here I'm gonna just grab the same example from the documentation. Let's update some of the copy so it makes sense for our use case. And at the dialog footer, we want to have a cancel and a continue or confirm button. I'm going to create an interface for the props that this component is going to take. Now back in the app component, we are going to declare another set of state, this time for the alert dialog, and we're going to call it delete dialog. And now from the delete option in our drop-down item, we are going to set the delete dialog to true. And we have a little issue here. Let's see. Oh, delete dialog open. Again, select delete dialog open. Let's go back down and update correctly. Everything is okay now. Now that the delete option is also setting a book as a current book, we're going to make sure that the current book is defined. And we're going to pass the same set of props that we passed on the book model. Open for the delete dialog open change, and the book. Let's give it a try here. Looks like we have an issue with the order of our components. This dialog cancel must be used inside dialog content, so let's take a look. Okay, let's see again. Great, that's working okay now. Since the component now has access to the book, we can add some information about the book in the alert dialog. That seems to be working fine. Let's add a little bit of styles to the book title so it looks a little bit different to the rest of the text. That's good enough. All right, we are going to wrap up the video here. We did a lot, actually. We set up Shadcn, we added components, we created our own components to create the base needed for our book management system. And in the next video, we will create endpoints in our HONO API and we will start integrating them with the user interface. So thanks a lot and I'll see you in the next one.